Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nalini Sharma, and I head the special program here at UNEP Chemicals and Waste Branch. As Dan mentioned, the special program was established to support institutional strengthening at the national level for implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the Minamata Convention, and the strategic approach to international chemicals management. The 27th session of the Governing Council Global Ministerial Environment Forum, in its decision 27/12, Section 8 on chemicals and waste management, invited governments to consider establishing, through an existing institution, a special program. The Governing Council requested the Executive Director to facilitate and support a country-led meeting of governments and regional economic integration organizations and interested stakeholders, which then was subsequently held in Bangkok from the 27th to the 30th of August 2013 to discuss the terms of reference for the special program. Subsequently, in 2014, the first session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, UNEA 1, in its Resolution 1/5, welcomed an integrated approach to address the financing of the sound management of chemicals and waste, and underscored that the three components of an integrated approach, mainstreaming, industry involvement, and dedicated external finance, are mutually reinforcing and important for the financing of sound management of chemicals and waste at all levels. UNEA 1 further adopted the terms of reference for a special program to be funded by voluntary contributions to support institutional strengthening at the national level, to enhance the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the Minamata Convention, and the strategic approach to international chemicals management. The terms of reference defined institutional strengthening as enhancing the sustainable institutional capacity of governments to develop, adopt, monitor, and enforce policy, legislation, and regulation, as well as gain access to financial and other resources to ensure sound chemicals and waste management throughout their life cycle. The terms of reference stipulate that it is expected that strengthened national institutions would have the capacity to do the following: develop and monitor the implementation of national policy, strategies, programs, and legislation, adopt, monitor, enforce legislation and regulation frameworks, mainstream chemicals and waste sound management into national development plans, national budgets, policies, legislation, and implementation frameworks, work in a multi-sectoral, effective, efficient, transparent, accountable, and sustainable manner in the long term, promote multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder cooperation and coordination, promote involvement, responsibility, and accountability of the private sector, promote the effective implementation of the
click on the audio.
Cooperative coordinated implementation of these instruments at the national level. In addition, the terms of reference provide for the scope of the special program, noting that the program should avoid duplication and proliferation of funding mechanisms and associated administration, and should fund activities that fall outside the mandate of the Global Environment Facility. And finally, the terms of reference also provided a list of activities to be funded under the special program. And this list, of course, as you will note, is in the terms of reference. It's also included in the application guidelines for the special program first call for applications. UNEA 1, in its Resolution 1/5, requested the Executive Director of UNEP, consistent with the terms of reference for the special program, to establish and administer the Special Program Trust Fund and to provide a secretariat to deliver administrative support to the program. In response to this request, the Executive Director of UNEP provides the secretariat of the special program, which is hosted within UNEP's Chemicals and Waste Branch in DTIE. UNEA Resolution 1/5 also encouraged governments in a position to do so, as well as the private sector, including industry, foundations, other non-governmental organizations, and stakeholders, to mobilize financial resources for the effective establishment and the quick start implementation of the special program. The Special Program Trust Fund has been formally established. The trust fund will be open for contributions and applications for 7 years. To date, approximately US$ 14 million has been pledged and contributed to the trust fund from Austria, the European Union, Finland, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and the United States. The terms of reference of the special program stipulate that an executive board will be the decision-making body and oversee the special program with the support of the Secretariat. The executive board has been established with the representatives from recipient countries as follows: Kenya representing Africa, Brazil and Argentina representing Latin America and the Caribbean, sharing a 2-year term, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia representing Central Eastern Europe, Yemen representing least developed countries and small island developing states. And the donor representatives are as follows: the European Union, Finland, Germany, Sweden, and the United States. The country to represent Asia and the Pacific is still to be decided. For meetings of the Executive Board, the Executive Secretaries of the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions and the Minamata Convention, the coordinator of SAICM, and representatives of the Secretariat of the Global Environment Facility, as well as representatives of governments and regional economic integration organizations, any implementing agencies, and one representative from each of the bureaus of the governing bodies of the instruments may participate at their own expense as observers at the meeting of the Executive Board. In accordance with the terms of reference, Letizia de Carvalho from Brazil and Mr. Nico Uro from Finland were elected co-chairs of the Executive Board, representing a recipient country and a donor country respectively. The terms of reference stipulate that the mandate and functions of the board would be as follows: they would meet on a yearly basis, take decisions by consensus wherever possible, further develop its rules of procedure at its first meeting, and take operational decisions regarding the functioning of the special program, including the approval of applications for funding, the endorsement of procedures for application, assessment, reporting, and evaluation. And the board will also provide operational guidance on the implementation of the special program and provide advice on any other matters as required. The first meeting of the board was held from 2 to 3 February 2016. So this is a couple of months ago, and significant progress was made with agreement reached on the rules of procedure for the operations of the Executive Board of the Special Program, the application guidelines, and the application forms. The Executive Board considered the project funding levels and agreed that projects would have a funding range from $50,000 to $250,000, with a maximum of $500,000 for a more comprehensive project on institutional strengthening. The Executive Board agreed that the maximum duration of a project would be for 3 years and would start upon signature of the agreement between the Secretariat of the Special Program and the government entity. This duration was based on experience of the SAICM Quick Start program, which in its recent evaluation findings highlighted that a 2-year project duration did not provide for sufficient time for the implementation of project activities and reporting. Finally, the Executive Board agreed that the first round of applications would be launched as a pilot phase to enable the program to be up and running as soon as possible, and that the lessons learned from this pilot phase would subsequently be reflected in revised guidelines and application procedures. The terms of reference outline the eligibility for support from the special program, which include the availability for developing countries, taking into account the needs of least developing countries, developed countries, and small island developing states, and for countries with economies in transition, with priority given to those with least capacity. Applicants will be eligible if they're party to one of any of the relevant conventions, i.e. the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm, and/or Minamata conventions, or have demonstrated that they're in the process of preparing for ratification for any one of the conventions. And finally, applications will include identification of associated domestic measures to be taken to ensure that national institutional capacity supported by the special program is sustainable in the long term. A list of criteria was developed to support the Executive Board to appraise and approve projects, and it was agreed that these criteria would include the following, taking into account that the assessment of information provided by the applicant would have to be done on a case-by-case basis. So these include proposal of measures within the objective of the special program, sustainability of the project outcome, contribution of resources equal to the value of 25% of the total allocation requested in the application, noting that in accordance with the terms of reference, the Executive Board may reduce that percentage commensurate with the consideration of the specific national circumstances, capacity constraints, gaps, and needs of the applicant. Examples of such contributions is provided in the budget application form, which I'll get to in a little while. Performance targets to measure progress achieved by the special program, identification of mainstreaming of sand management of chemicals and waste in various sectors, participation and commitment of relevant actors and sectors, including agriculture, environment, health, labor, industry, and other sectors in the implementation of the measures proposed. Project intervention on one or more of the instruments, identification of the conventions to which the applicant country is a party, and or of actual participation SICAM. And as I mentioned earlier, this list of criteria was developed to support the board to appraise and approve the projects, taking into account that the assessment of the information provided by the applicant would be done on a case-by-case basis. As you will have seen in the application guidelines, the board also identified some other considerations which could be considered during the appraisal phase. And again, this assessment of the information will be done on a case-by-case basis and has to be in line with the objectives of the special program. These include determination of cumulative allocations to a country based on the contributions received and needs expressed by the application submitted, whether earlier projects involving the countries applying for a second time, and this of course will be more pertinent to the second and subsequent calls for applications, to ensure that the project implementation for previous rounds was considered satisfactory within the time frame and budget allocation. Thirdly, that it may be sought to avoid duplication of projects in the same country. However, consideration may be given towards replicating a successful project for other countries. Whether the project promotes enhanced coordination and cooperation at the national level to implement the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, the Minamata Convention, and the strategic approach to international chemicals management. Whether the project builds on previous initiatives and institutional mechanisms already established. Whether the project proposes regional activities, provided that these are in line with the objective of the special program. And finally, gender considerations and mainstreaming. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this information can be found in the project application guidelines and the project application forms. So the launch of the first call for applications took place on the 5th of April, earlier this month, and the deadline for applications is the 4th of July, which provides a 3-month period for when the applications can be received. Further information on the special program call for applications can be found on the special program website, and the website address is provided on your screen. And the application documents are also available for download. These include the project application guidelines, the project summary form, the full project proposal form, and the budget form. In terms of next steps, as mentioned earlier, the deadline for applications is the 4th of July. Upon receipt of these application forms and packages, the Secretariat will acknowledge receipt no later than 1 week of receipt by the applicant. The application then will be screened by the Special Program Secretariat to make sure it is complete and eligible for support. Once screened by the Secretariat, the applicant will be informed if the application is considered complete and eligible ad interim and forward for consideration by the Executive Board. During the screening process, the Secretariat may request for additional information or clarification from the applicant in order to facilitate the eligibility process. And this will be done between the period July to September 2016. The Secretariat will then submit complete and eligible proposals to the Executive Board to the annual meeting for review and consideration. The second meeting of the Board is scheduled to take place in October 2016. The applicant will then be notified in writing by the Secretariat of the Board's decision. Kindly note that until the Board meets in October 2016, the Secretariat is not in a position to provide any updates on approval of applications. And finally, following the approval of project applications, the Secretariat will put in place project management arrangements, including the conversion of applications into small-scale funding agreements or other relevant instruments, which would form the basis of a signed funding agreement between the project proponent and UNEP as the trust fund administrator. The financial and reporting arrangements will also be set up by the project manager. With this, I've finished my presentation on for this webinar series. So some further information sources are available on this slide. Once we finish this webinar, Dan will then circulate the presentation to the participants. And I'd like to now open the floor for any questions or clarifications as necessary. Thank you.